Greetings and salutations, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of Playing Video Games Incorrectly. This time, we have a game that's been part of my childhood for as long as I can remember. Megaman X Command Mission features our hero X from the Megaman X series in a top-secret mission where he and his friends aim to stop a rebellion robot uprising from happening. It's a turn-based RPG with 10 chapters of robo-destruction, interesting game mechanics, and quality of life features that seem really ahead of its time, such as being able to switch your frontline party members with backline members on the fly without losing your turn, and the ability to retry fights if you end up losing so that you don't have to retread through the same areas to reach the same fight again. Yeah, this is all a bit standard nowadays, but I still don't see enough RPGs actually utilizing these kinds of features. Persona 5, for instance, still has you protecting Joker at all costs, or risk losing tons of progress. And yes, you can technically switch out party members, but one, that's an unlockable feature, and two, it still wastes turn to do so. Unfortunately, most of these features go unused anyway, as we play through the game in a way it was not intended, like quite literally, as you'll see, as we find out whether or not you can beat Megaman X Command Mission using only X. As for the rules of this run, obviously I can only use X in every single encounter in the game. That's it. That's really the only rule of the run. Unlike other challenge runs we've done on this channel where there's always this sort of stipulation or questions like, are healing skills made by demons allowed? Or what if you have to use a demon to investigate in Raido, for instance? There's not really anything like that. Well, there are a couple of things that come up, but one of those things ends up having a low impact on the run in general, while the other thing ended up not adding as much to begin with. We'll get there. That being said, there are some miscellaneous restrictions that I'll be imposing on myself, mostly to keep the run fair, straightforward, and to the point as humanly possible. Unlike other RPGs, Megaman X Command Mission doesn't really have much incentive to grind for levels, powerful items, etc., since everything you really need is given to you as the story progresses, while more optional items like keys to secret areas and even artwork are delegated to a completely optional feature that you could just do on the go anyway, which we'll touch more on later. As such, for this solo run, we will be doing as little grinding as possible. There will be times where I might need to divert the run to obtain an item necessary for a boss fight, but that's inevitable with these kinds of runs, sadly. And yes, I do know that you can technically grind out permanent stat increase items for basic enemies fairly early on in the game, all with a 1% drop rate, mind you. And yes, I do know about the guaranteed belladonna spawns that you can infinitely farm build speeds on to make yourself faster than everything else in the game, meaning you just get infinite turns, yada yada yada. However, I'm not doing that for this run. Because one, the belladonnas are incredibly hard to solo as opposed to normal gameplay, allowing you to easily steal and cheese them reliably. And two, it defeats the spirit of the run to make yourself godly not even halfway through the run, and in my opinion limits the kind of creative decisions that you'll see me make in this video. So now that we've gotten those out of the way, it's time to start the run. The game starts us off with X-Zero and a newcomer named Shadow heading into the ruins in the middle of a place called Giga City in order to track the whereabouts of the leader of the rebellion army, Epsilon. Apparently, we aren't the only ones who were sent in, as our leader, Colonel Redeps, mentions that the team before us has likely perished. So why he didn't bother sending his top elites that have been known to quell even the likes of Sigma in the first place, I'm not entirely sure, but here we are. He also emphasizes that if we fail, he'll be forced to launch an indiscriminate assault on Giga City itself, which is just lovely. Once inside, we discover that the ruins are all ruins, just as X suspected. And what better way to survey an entire island of ruins than to put our trust in the hands of some guy named Shadow the Hedgehog, who is in no way problematic and just so happens to know the exact layout of this island. And now we're separated. To be fair, this wasn't Shadow the Frog Dog's doing. And it's exactly what X wanted all along, as having friends can be very cumbersome. Despite what he says otherwise in previous games, anyway. Suddenly we're...
Finders keepers for any goodies.
Zero, what the hell? You're not even concerned for your best friend? Whatever. He's right though, any goodies we find will be ours, but at least have the courtesy to reassure us, man. Oh well. Anyways, we start the game as God intended, all by ourselves with our pea shooter as we begin Chapter 1, Infiltrate Giga City. The chapter starts us off with, oh hey Zero, nice of you to call. That's right, we can still talk to each other remotely, but only at certain times in the mission. Anyways, now we're ready to truly begin. As you can see, these are our starting stats. 523 hit points sounds like a lot, but numbers in this game can actually be quite large, as you'll see soon enough. We start with the regular X-Buster we all know and love, which comes with the measly power of 10, granting us a total of 32 power. That's not all it does. See, unlike other RPGs where you have to weigh a bunch of options like weapons, armor, accessories, etc., the gear system in this game is quite simplified. Usually to the game's benefit, but sometimes to its detriment as well. Let's take a look at the X-Buster again. Along with 10 power, it also grants us 5 armor and 5 shields, as well as weighs 8 pounds? Kilos? The weight of our sin? Well, to be fair, the other stats aren't inherently explained either. You can go into some of the help options, which will explain everything you need to know pretty thoroughly, but allow me. Power equates to the relative amount of damage you'll be doing when attacking enemies. The higher the number, the higher amounts of damage you'll end up doing. Simple enough. Armor and shields sound very similar, but function in different ways. Armor reduces the amount of damage you take from combat-related attacks, which is what the game typically refers to melee damage as, while shields do the same, but for shot-related attacks, which is the game's term for range damage, like bullets. Some attacks don't count as either, and so those actually tend to ignore these stats, which I'll ding them when they become relevant. Speed, meanwhile, affects the turn order, which doesn't sound like much, but you'll see why speed matters in a moment. That being said, this is where weight plays a part. The more a piece of gear weighs, the more it reduces your speed, so you'll have to really weigh the pros and cons of every weapon you discover. Do you take the extra power and dumpster your speed in the process so you can get less overall turns, or do you take the extra speed to go faster but deal less damage? All unique stuff if you ask me. Along with your main weapon, you also have 2 sub-weapons you can equip at once. These act as smaller ways to influence the battle, usually by letting you deal a small extra pittance of damage to the enemy, like with your default micro missiles for example. But there are plenty of sub-weapons that make you shred encounters, which we will be making liberal use of as the run progresses. Here you'll notice that we have 3 types of elemental damage: fire, water, and thunder. By default, we take full damage from all elements, but there are ways to change that using our force metals, or FM slots, represented by the bottom right box. The short explanation of force metals is that they're essentially our stand-ins for accessories in this game. They provide small buffs, or big buffs in some cases, that affect various aspects of whoever you equip them with. Some give you more health to play with, some increase your stats a little bit, while some can grant you higher crit rates, or even the ability to steal all the XP for yourself, you stingy. There is a catch when using force metal. You see that little number here next to the immunity? Every force metal has a number associated called erosion that can bring that number up or even down in rare cases. Some force metals, like the analyzer, has an erosion value of 0, so it doesn't affect the number in any way. But this plus 100 LE, that's life energy, a stand-in for hit points in this game, costs 3 erosion points to install. While this number might seem meaningless, if you look to the left you'll see a little 10 right there. If the amount of erosion points you have ever exceed this number, bad things might start to happen. Alert status occurs when you go over your immunity by a little bit and makes it so that there's a chance every time you start the battle to have your maximum life energy and weapon energy generation, more on that later, cut down significantly. When you reach danger status, this is pretty much guaranteed to happen every combat, so it's extremely important to be mindful of what you can and can't equip. But don't you worry, that little 10 won't stay 10 forever, as X gains more immunity as he levels up, and has one of the kindest immunity growths in the game. A result of all those zinc supplements, I'm sure. Unlike you, Zero. What the shit, you're level 99 with only 35 immunity? No wonder you keep dying in every game. Build some tolerance. Now, before we officially begin the story part of the game, let's discuss one last important part of the run, the combat system. If we take a look here, these are our current battle options. Square and circle activate our sub-weapons, while X activates our main weapon. When using sub-weapons that directly affect an enemy, the targeting cursor locks you into that enemy, so be sure that's the target you actually want to hit with your main weapon. Meanwhile, your main weapon will perform a normal attack against the enemy you target, but immediately end your turn. You can also use R2 to use your action trigger, which is a special attack unique to every character that does various things depending on who uses it. In this instance, X performs a strong charge shot that damages all enemies at once. Meanwhile, triangle is used to bring up a menu of various other actions that you can use on your turn, like using sub-tanks to heal yourself, items to restore status or damage enemies, defending to reduce incoming damage until your next turn, hyper mode, which we'll go over soon, run to flee combat, and analyze to examine enemies for basic information. At the bottom left, you have a life energy and weapon energy gauge. This weapon energy is used to fuel your sub-weapons. In this case, 10 weapon energy is required for micro missiles, and you'll need at least 50% of this meter to be full to use your action trigger. But don't worry, every character has their own weapon energy meters, so you can just use it whenever you feel like it. That being said, X starts each battle with 25% weapon energy right off the bat and gains an additional 25% weapon energy at the start of his turns, so it's pretty simple to keep track of. Basically, if you aren't making active use of your sub-weapons, you'll have your action trigger at 100% every 4 rounds. Lastly, on the bottom right you have the turn order for the next few rounds, which I personally really like because the turn order isn't always the same. Those familiar with Clair Obscura know exactly what this is and how it functions, I'm sure. Right now, it looks like your typical run-of-the-mill turn order from any other game, where everyone takes their turn once before cycling back. But as the game progresses, it becomes a bit more complicated based on everyone's speed stat. Sometimes when your speed is high enough, you can go again before the second enemy even has a chance to go, or go even twice in a row at times. Not only that, but using items, defending, using a sub-tank, using your action trigger, or even cancelling your turn after using a sub-weapon, but not your main weapon, all have an impact on your turn order in one way or another. So there's just this little bit of extra nuance to the game. Unfortunately, none of that gets showcased here, as this fight is basically a tutorial fight that just tells you to use your action trigger to take down multiple enemies, and boom! First combat finished. Victory music plays and XP is obtained. Nice. Continuing on, we make our first save, grab some money by dashing through this little blue item box, which is how we obtain loot in this game, and unlock some doors for Zero over on his side of the building. Well, it's a good thing we decided to split the party now, ain't it? Immediately after this, we loot a very important item for this run, Build Life Energy, or just Build LE for short. These build items are one-time use permanent stat boosts for whatever stat they represent. In this instance, plus 10 hit points to X. And you'll find them everywhere in this game, but not enough to make you feel like God unless you actively grind for them by killing or stealing some from certain enemies, including bosses. Outside of that, it's important to keep in mind where to obtain some of these items for this run specifically, since we'll be soloing this entire thing. After fighting more bat bones, we obtain more XP and we level up, which is only noteworthy here because I wanted to mention that leveling up essentially acts as a hard refresh for all your hit points and hyper mode activations, which comes in handy many times during this run, let me tell you. Next we find a room with resting pods that have been broken out of with the names Wild Django, Dr. Psyche, Silverhorn, and Machgentra. Those familiar with the game will know that these are 4 of the main story bosses you fight later on. Zero also mentions that there are 4 on his side as well, which technically adds up to 8, but we'll address that in a moment. Continuing to the upper floors, we find some more pods for a couple of high-performance Reploids, Scarface, but more importantly Epsilon himself, the man we're going after. Now, avid players who've played this game before know who the other 2 high-performance Reploids are, as well as at least one more Reploid found in the other 4 pods. However, there have always been 3 pods that are unaccounted for the entirety of the game. So what happened to them? Well, apparently due to time constraints, Capcom couldn't fully implement these 3 Reploids into the story. So instead, they delegated 2 of them to Super Boss status, and the last one was essentially repurposed as an extra story boss in Chapter 10. Why do I bring this up? Because it's something that's always bothered me, and I want y'all to share in my hyperfixations in the only way I know how, that's why. Also because 95% of Chapter 1 and 2 is just X doing his own thing for the main story, and I needed something interesting to talk about for those who have played before. There's just not a lot going on in these first couple of chapters until the boss fight, so you just play as you normally would, really. We discover a melt missile subweapon that costs 15 weapon energy to use, has a power of 30 and a chance to lower an enemy's shield stat by 10%, which would technically make our X-Buster hit a bit harder, but sadly it doesn't come up often. For now though, we do use this little guy until we find something a bit better. Disabling the next lock requires us to play a synchronization game with Zero. Then we're followed up with our first real fight of the game with a Prion Chaser. It's pretty sturdy and can hit us with the stun gun, which inflicts us with the bind status, dupstering our speed stat and making my turns come way less often until it cures on its own or until I use an item to cure it. While not that bad under normal circumstances, getting hit with bind in later areas of the game can be a death sentence, so it's good to avoid it whenever possible. Greedy is a low accuracy move with a 75% chance to critically hit when it lands. Fortunately, this battle isn't too hard, and I kill it with a couple of well-placed X-Buster shots and obtain a couple of fairly useful force medals, X-Heart and LE plus 100. LE plus 100 is simple, it just increases your maximum health by 100 and costs 3 erosion. Meanwhile, X-Heart acts as a one-time use, once per battle, auto-revive whenever your hit points drop to 0, but it only restores 10% of your health. This can be useful if you want to give yourself one last chance to turn the battle around before you inevitably eat the pavement, and has admittedly come in clutch on several occasions. See this yellow item box? It contains tank energy, which is used to refuel your sub-tanks. What are sub-tanks, you ask? Well, just like the soft drink of America, Dr. Pepper, sub-tanks are made from a blend of 23 different fruit and spice extracts that restore lost health when drank. But unlike Dr. Pepper, they don't make you fat. To drink one, you must press triangle while in battle to go into the battle menu. Select sub-tank and pick from one of 6 flavors like you're at your local Taco Bell. Just like Taco Bell, you're only there for one option, their Mountain Dew Baja Blast, or in this case, Life Gain Max. But in all seriousness, all of them are good in different situations. You have the normal life gains, which affect a single target, and then the AoE versions, which affect all active units. But since we're just a lonely blue bomber, we're just gonna focus on using the former. As for how they work, it's simple enough. There's a 25, 50, and max version. Life Gain 25 restores a unit's health by 25% of its maximum health. Life Gain 50 restores 50%, you get the picture. However, there's a catch. Each option comes at a cost, denoted by the cost column. When used, the cost is then deducted from your tank energy. You start with 200% tank energy, and once you run out, you're pretty much running on whatever health you have. So you want to avoid using too much unless you know you can gain some back, such as when there's one of these piss-colored boxes nearby. If you get this little symbol that's shaped like an X, it means that you've already capped on that item. So, if I re-enter the room, the item box will regenerate, ready to be collected again once I drink some of my vitamin-enriched Monster Energy drink. After taking out some adorable little robo-dogs and getting another message from Zero, I found a full tank energy refill in case you drank all of your Mountain Dew for some reason. There is also a backup, which is a full revive that we can't use, and a build shield item, which lets me survive ranged attacks just a little bit easier. I also found a locked door that requires a Lograno key right next to the save point. This is a very important door that we'll come to later. Instead, we take out a Prion Chaser, level up to 4, and run into a new enemy right after, the Prion Bitmaster. This one likes to summon minions and occasionally likes to run away like real-life crypto bros. Yeah, just like that. Making our way to the next room, we meet up with our BFF Zero, but not Shadow, who is suspiciously absent. Zero then joins our party. Zero, what are you doing? You can't be here. This is my time to shine. Oh hey, a convenient boss fight with a hippo with a rocket on its back. Neat. Well, anyway, it seems like Zero's narcolepsy kicked in, leaving him very eepy for the next battle, giving us the perfect opportunity to take this beast down all on my... Oh. But seriously, to explain what's going on here, basically there's no inherent way to do this run solo by legitimate means. Once you get more than 3 party members, you can switch them out as much as you wish, but you must always have 3 active members at any given time. And at the time of recording this, there was only one real way to make this run work solo. Essentially, Robin did some digging and discovered some action replay codes that could be repurposed to make it so that every party member except X was infinitely at 0 hit points. The reason why we did this instead of letting party members die is because the game does that Persona 2 thing where KO'd party members are brought back up to 1 hit point after every fight, Since then, we found a better cheat that just deletes every other party member except X in real time, but that wasn't until way later, and even that has some consequences that might make for a more interesting run if anyone else wants to try the game solo, but we'll go ahead and table that discussion for later. For now though, let's talk about this guy. Normally this fight is pretty easy as the fight essentially serves as a tutorial for all the different enemy types you'll encounter, teaching you that some units are better for fighting certain enemies than others, and so on and so forth. As you've just seen, the fight starts out with a warning about a shark missile being prepared for launch. The idea of this boss fight is to demonstrate that there are 2 targets, the hippo and the missile. So naturally, you'll want to destroy the missile first. This is easy to do with X as he's able to shoot targets in the air. However, Zero wouldn't be able to reliably hit the missile due to his Z-Saber dealing combat damage, so he'll often miss. Meanwhile, the hippo's head has resistance to X-Buster's shots, so Zero is technically better suited for this position. It's an excellent way to introduce bullshit enemy types in a much more controlled environment by giving you 2 units with demonstrably different fighting styles and putting you up against an encounter where both characters can shine equally. However, with Zero napping on the job, both duties fall to us, and it's not actually that easy. The Hippopressor, yes, that's what it's called, has 5,000 life energy, basic defense against all elements, and can use Heavy Flyer, a move that reduces the current hit points of all party members by 25% with a very low chance to hit. It can also use Hippo Vulcan, which deals 8 hits of shot-type damage to a single target, but only while its head is intact. It also launches its shark missile every time the missile's turn comes around, as indicated by the turn order. The missile deals a flat 500 damage to the target that can't be mitigated by normal means. Somehow, I have to make sure I kill the missile as much as possible, while also being able to deal as much damage as I can to the Hippopressor's head, all without using up all my tank energy on healing myself. Luckily, there is a solution. Let's talk about the hyper modes. Every party member you get in the game has a hyper mode that they can temporarily switch into to modify themselves in various ways. For example, Zero's hyper mode turns him into the black variant armor that you see in the later X games, and grants him a huge attack boost, speed boost, weapon energy gain boost, slight fire resistance, and a chance to automatically counterattack enemies when hit. X's hyper mode, X-Fire, meanwhile, gives X a complete makeover as his entire loadout changes, including his action trigger. His sub-weapons turn into Power Charge and Shell Buster, while his X-Buster turns into a melee attack that deals fire damage. X's stats also gain a boost. Specifically, his maximum and current life energy increases by 50%, speed by 25%, weapon energy gain by 25%, and the damage he takes from all shot type and combat type attacks are reduced by half, with a few exceptions, Shark Missile being one of them, sadly. This is the crux of our build, and will be absolutely crucial to use in various parts of the run. Unfortunately, hyper modes aren't meant to last forever. Every character's hyper mode lasts a varying amount of turns before they are forced to cool down, which is referred to as activations. Fortunately, hyper mode turns don't need to be consecutive, and X gets 6 of them, so if you want to end your hyper mode early to conserve what you have left, then you are most welcome to do so. This is useful because you don't regain any uses of your hyper mode until you level up, rest, or use a specific item called Gain Hyper to restore all expended activations. What I like most about hyper mode though is going into or out of it doesn't use up an activation straight away. So if you manage to finish a battle the turn you go into hyper mode, you retain all your activations, as if you hadn't used it at all. Do keep in mind, however, that once you go into hyper mode, you can't back out of it until the next turn, and vice versa. Anyways, we go into hyper mode and use X's new action trigger to deliver a hefty shock to the hippo's head, instantly destroying it and revealing the tube hole underneath. Unfortunately, this doesn't make the fight that much easier, as the Hippopressor can now start using Hippo Particle Cannon to deal shot type thunder damage, which also binds. Fortunately for me, another neat quirk about Hyper Mode I should mention is the fact that they all give you a hidden benefit of ignoring any and all status conditions, including stat reductions. Sadly, X-Fire still can't do much against the Shark missile, so we do have to cool down and shoot the missile to destroy it every so often. This can cause the Hippo to waste its next turn summoning another missile instead of attacking, which can give us a little leeway while we deal with our own low health situation. However, there is a conundrum that comes out of this. Healing would be useful, but if we get hit by the particle cannon again, we might be put in a loop of healing rather than dealing damage. On the other hand, we could use our charged shot to hit both the head and the shark missile. But this brings up a downside of using action triggers, which is that it temporarily dumpsters your speed stat, or at the very least, it has a high chance to skip your next turn in the turn order. I only say that it dumpsters your speed stat because it doesn't seem to happen nearly as often when you have a high enough speed. Regardless, this means that sometimes using charge shot has a good chance to make the turn order end up looking like this. Yeah, this fight is no joke. So how do I get through this fight? Well, there's a mechanic in this game called defending, and that essentially halves all damage you take until your next turn. Luckily, unlike the inherent damage resistant X-Fire gives us, this one seems to have far less restrictions attached to it, meaning Shark Missile only hits us for 250 damage. Defending, along with using items and sub-tanks, also has a great chance at moving us forward in the turn order, but not when used twice. This also seems to apply to all these options at once, so you can't use sub-tank for an extra turn and then an item for another, for example. There's like a hard cap for gaining that extra turn is the best way I can really put it, I guess. Also, defending does come with the downside of having the amount of weapon energy you gain on your next turn, just something to keep in mind. Defending also blocks conditions and stat reductions, so Particle Cannon completely screwing us over is now off the table. So, now this fight is all about timing when to heal, defend, and attack. I did run out of sub-tanks unfortunately, but I did discover something interesting about this fight that I'd never actually seen before. From what I can tell, Hippopressor can only summon his missile a finite number of times in the fight before he just starts throwing out attacks. This was honestly the only reason I was able to finish the fight almost unhindered, and after one final charge collider, X's action trigger in X-Fire mode, and 52 turns later, the Hippopressor becomes the Hippopressed. Normally, if you're fast enough, you can earn a little bit of extra XP, but I wasn't, obviously. Still, this being a solo run, I got to hog all of Zero's XP for myself, raising me to level 6 in the process. He also drops a fire missile sub-weapon and a guard buster, which is better than our current X-Buster in terms of power, armor, and shield, but it hampers our speed in the process. After the fight, Zero wakes up and realizes he left his wallet with Shadow the Hedgehog on the upper floors, so we head up there, but not before finding these useless little trinkets. I say useless because equipping a +1 stat booster doesn't really affect much unless you equip multiple copies of them, but there's usually better force medals that you could be using. We equip them anyways, since why the hell not, and head on our merry way, I guess. Once upstairs, we finally catch up to our buddy, Shadow the Ledge Leg, and discover Epsilon is just chilling up here, ready to introduce himself to us in the funniest way possible.
Indeed, it is I, Epsilon, the Rebellion Army Commander.
He does compliment us by saying,
I have heard many things about you. The great Maverick Hunters, X and Zero.
But not Shadow the Eggnog, I guess. Afterwards, he tries to recruit us into his freaky robo-sex cult, but we tell him very nicely that we already have a subscription to Magnet Tugging Monthly, so instead Shit, they converted Shadow the Stag Peg! Luckily, we came prepared, and Zero and X team up to... Oh, looks like the Kinky Brigade is here. There's Ferrum, the embodiment of BDSM, Scarface, embodiment of shock play, and Botos, the ugly bastard. Unfortunately, Zero is too busy taking backshots from Shadow the Lemonade to really do anything and gets blasted off the map to the fabled Tilted Towers. Meanwhile, Epsilon, the embodiment of power play, gives us one more chance to join him. X's response is to then shoot the ground and escape in the smoke screen created by the rubble? I guess? Huh.